Hello. Thank you all so much for joining me. Welcome to the fifth segment of Love Talks. I am your host, Ina Love, and I'm so happy that you are here to join me today. I'd like to say hello to any of my family and friends who are watching, and a big welcome to anyone who is joining for the first time. Today on Love Talks, we'll be covering the topic of healing from loss, which loss is something that is inevitable, something that we all experience in life. And loss can show up in several different ways, but I'll be sharing some insight on healing from all types of loss. As always, I like to begin with just a brief recap of what we talked about in previous Love Talk segments. If you'd like to go back and revisit any of those, or perhaps watch them if you've missed any of them. So the first segment was on basically an introduction to Love Talks, where I shared information about my own personal healing journey and what I've learned along the way. And I'm sharing all of that with an intention to help you to find your way in life, as we're all trying to do. Um, the second Love Talk segment is on what is the purpose of life and why are we here? And I shared a lot of insight on that as well. The third Love Talk, we covered the power of love, and I shared two powerful true stories. One demonstrating how God has so powerfully moved in my life, and another true story of the power of love and how love made something that I thought was impossible. Love made that possible. And then last week, we covered the power of forgiveness and how forgiveness is such a vital part to healing the heart, because everything that I've shared in these first five segments is all about healing the heart so that we can open our hearts to receive all the blessings that God has in store for us. So today, as we talk about healing from loss, we'll somewhat complete that segment on healing the heart, and you'll understand that more as we move through this. So let's begin with the healing from loss. So, as I said in the beginning, loss is something that is inevitable. It is something that we must all face. It's part of the human experience. I like to say that, unfortunately, death is something that is unavoidable, but suffering is optional. We actually do not have to suffer when we lose a loved one. And again, you'll understand this all more clearly as we move through this segment. So, I see that loss appears in our life in three ways. It can be, again, the loss of a loved one. It can be the loss of a relationship, as when a relationship ends. We can also experience a loss, perhaps through a natural disaster or a tragic event, or some incident where we've suffered great loss of possessions or things that we hold dear. These are all experiences that many of us have gone through. And we'll go through each of these individually, and I will show you or explain tips and techniques that will help you in dealing with these type of events, should you have these situations. And obviously, many of us have and obviously will experience the loss of a loved one. So let's begin with loss of possessions. So right now, today, with everything that's happening in the world, I think we're all experiencing some type of a loss to some degree. Our lives have changed to some degree. Everyone is trying to find their way to make it through this time. There's a lot of fear swirling around. So many things are going on. When we have a type of loss, as I said, when I'm saying a natural disaster where you might lose your home and all of your possessions, The thing that causes us pain is the idea, the thoughts of, that everything is lost. It is the thoughts that torment us. And what I'm going to help you to see is that by changing your mind, you can move through those type of experiences. If you should, ever experience anything like that, you can you can move through those type of experiences with a different mindset, which will help you to move through it easier and quicker. So again, in the case of a natural disaster or something of that effect, and you've lost everything, it's very devastating, obviously. But there is something that I call the greater truth. And if you're able to get to the greater truth in your mind, it will help you to move through that experience. In the case of losing all of your possessions, a greater truth would look something like, obviously, the fact that first and foremost, you still have your life. And life, of course, is the greatest gift of all. So being present to the fact that, perhaps all of the material possessions are lost, but the gift of life, is the greatest gift of all, because of course, things can be replaced. So by really digging to find the greater truth, we can move through these experiences without having to suffer. And that's really, the basis of this segment today is helping you to understand how you can move through all forms of loss with minimal suffering. So again, dig to find those greater truths. All things can be replaced. And we don't always understand why things happen, but God has a plan for all of us. And, everything has a season. So, just to fill your mind and heart with real truth, that you will get through that experience, that, you will rebuild your life, that life goes on, oftentimes things get even better after a tragic event. So, again, just to move through with positivity. It is an opportunity, as it is right now with everything that we're going through right now, to get closer to God, to really develop a strong and powerful relationship with God. If that is not something that you're currently doing, really work to develop that relationship, because believe me, with an open heart, God will fill your life with blessings. And, I've shared many stories throughout these segments, and I'll be sharing some beautiful, powerful story with you today. And, and we'll continue to do that as we move through these love talks. The second type of loss, as I said, could be the end of a relationship, as in, perhaps you are married or very deeply in love with someone, and for whatever reason, that relationship has come to an end. What causes us suffering is obviously the idea, the hard reality of the situation that we're going through. But if you are able to keep your heart open, you will move through that experience with minimal pain and suffering. Now, we have a tendency, when a relationship ends, particularly if someone has done something that is hurtful, let's say you were married or in a love relationship and that person has cheated on you, or, for whatever reason, that relationship has to come to an end. We suffer because we try not to love the person. And truly, that is what causes us pain. In reality, and it is understandable. Someone has hurt you, you don't want to love them, but that is what causes the suffering, because love is our true nature. If we allow ourselves to love and keep our heart open just because we do, your heart cannot be filled with love and hate at the same time. So I'm offering to you, or suggesting to you, that if you are able to keep your heart open when a relationship ends, as difficult as it is, and I truly understand that, but no one should have to suffer. You know, it is okay to love someone. Love is a beautiful thing, and you just love them just because you do. When we try not to love ourselves, that is unnatural, and that is what causes the suffering. So, you know, that person doesn't even have to know that you love them. You know, you don't have to go around proclaiming that you love them. But the truth is, when it's all said and done, you do actually love that person, even though they've hurt you. So allow yourself to love them. And truly, that is what will set you free. So, you know, love really is the answer. Love is a healer. And, you know, I've continued to um, say that as we've moved through these Love Talk segments, that, you know, love is such a powerful tool that we have in our lives. And so many of us do not really realize this great gift that we have. So keep your heart open if you should you move through this experience, because I think most of us have or inevitably will. And again, the key to move through a loss in a relationship is simply to keep your heart open, to allow yourself to love someone simply because you do. It becomes an unconditional love. And also keep in mind, because, you know, I've been hurt in relationships before. I know what that is like. But everything we put out comes back to us. So, you know, everything that I share with you, it's always about you. It's not about the other person. It's not about what they did to you, or, you know, what happened in that relationship or the reason the relationship has ended. It's all about you moving through that experience with the least amount of pain and suffering as possible. So, keeping the heart open at all times is vital. And it does require work. When we're going through painful situations, it is not always easy to keep the heart open. But if you do, trust me, you will move through that experience quicker and much easier. So allow that space, you know, just to be filled with God's love. You can even think of it in a different way. You know, if the idea of loving someone that hurt you, if that is just too hard to do, just fill your heart with God's love. But you want to keep your heart open at all times. That is key. The third type of loss, obviously, is the loss of a loved one. And that can be, you know, any person that you hold dear in your life, be it a parent, a child. Unfortunately, you know, sometimes people experience the loss of a child. Those can be the most difficult of losses to experience. Also, the loss of a partner or a spouse, a dear friend, a family member, you know, the people that we hold closest to our hearts. You know, those losses can be most difficult. There are people who go lifetimes never getting over the loss of someone, you know, be it through the loss of because of a death, or the loss, you know, the breakup of a relationship. I know people who have suffered for many, many years because of the end of a relationship. And again, you don't have to suffer these losses. The key is truly to keep your heart open, to understand that no one truly dies. And I'm going to explain this, and then I'm going to demonstrate this with a clear story that demonstrates very clearly that, you know, as I said, no one truly dies. Each of us, each and every one of us, has a beautiful soul. You know, we are truly a spirit that is having a life experience. The way I sort of look at it is that when we come into this life, our soul inhabits a body. And I think of it somewhat like a costume. You know, our spirit enters a body and we have this life experience. When we die, or I actually say when we transition, because truly there is no such thing as death. The soul is eternal, the soul lives on. So we inhabit the body at the time of death or transition. We The soul actually, we take off the costume, but our spirit, our soul, which is truly eternal, our soul lives on. And your loved one, if you are open to this, you can develop a spiritual relationship with your loved one, which I have done with my father. And I'm going to share that story in a moment so you'll understand that very clearly. But no one truly dies. And if you become truly present to that, you can develop a different type of relationship with your loved one, which I call a spiritual relationship. And they will be very present in your life. They find miraculous ways of showing you that they are in your life. And it is the most beautiful and the most incredible experience ever, because they show up like at the least expected time. They show up when you need them most. And it is absolutely beautiful. We've all heard that, the spirit lives on and your loved one is still with you. And, oh, they're your guardian angel now. And, we've all heard all of those things. But I'm going to demonstrate to you through my own story, because I want you to really grasp this concept. Because, I can tell you, as I've said before in other segments, I can tell you anything, but I think when I actually show you through demonstration, it becomes very clear and obvious, and much more understandable. So in 2015, my father, who was a very young 88-year-old, he had a massive stroke. And my mother, she woke up in the middle of the night and found my father slumped over in a chair, and they rushed him to the hospital. He had been working in his garden that entire day. So as I said, he was a very young, healthy, strong, active 88-year-old. Gardening is very serious work. And my father was still maintaining a huge garden, which he had done his entire life. I think gardening was one of his most favorite things in life. So my father had a stroke. He was in essence in a coma. And my family called me. And let me just say this really quickly. I want you guys to realize two things as I share this story. One, you're going to see how God's hand was in this experience of my father's transition. And secondly, you're going to see how his presence is still very much in my life. So I got the phone call from one of my family members that my father had a stroke and I needed to come right away. Well, I'm going to put my hand to God, because I know this is hard to believe, but it is absolutely true. Hand to God. When I got the phone call from my family that my father had the stroke and I needed to come right away, my plane ticket to go to my hometown the next day was already booked. I had already planned to travel to my hometown. I was going there with a photographer because I had decided a couple of weeks prior that I was going to publish my book of poetry, and I wanted to go to my hometown to take photos for my book. So I had already booked a trip to my hometown. Mind you, of course, I had no idea. None of us knew that my father was going to have a stroke. He was very healthy and active, and, he wasn't even sick. We didn't know this was coming, but that was God's hand. My flight was already booked. I didn't even have to make travel reservations. So that was the first instance of God showing up for me in my father's transition. Now, let me just continue because I was going to share something else. But okay, so the next morning I wake up to get ready to go to the airport, and here's the second instance of God's hand in this. I had a tomato vine that grew in my backyard. I didn't plant it. I didn't even have grass in my backyard. I'm not a gardener. My father was an avid gardener. I've never gardened in my life, but there was a tomato vine that had started growing in my backyard. Like, several weeks prior, this tomato vine just appeared in one of my potted plants. And on the morning that I'm getting ready to go to my hometown to see my father, who's had a stroke and he's in a coma, I remembered that there was a ripe tomato on that vine. So I went outside and I picked that tomato and I held it in my hand and I said, God, I am going to Texas and I'm going to give this tomato to my father. Like, I spoke that with all the power, all the authority, with all my might. I said, I am going to give this tomato to my father. So I board my flight. I'm in the air halfway to Texas, and I get a text message from my daughter. I call this the third time God's hand was in this entire experience, because 5 years ago, as I said, my father transitioned in 2015. 5 years ago was not like it is today, where you can just log on to Wi-Fi and you can get text messages and internet and everything. You have access to everything. We used to have to turn off our cell phones, and I will admit, obviously my phone was not off, but I'm so happy it wasn't off that day, because I received a text message in the air from my daughter saying, oh my God, Grandpa woke up and he's trying to talk. So I land in Texas. I go directly to the hospital with my tomato in hand, and I show up in my father's room, and all of my siblings are there. I have 9 siblings, and they're all in the room. My mother was there, and everyone's just there, like all amazed that my father is awake, alert. And he was not able to speak, but he was very present. He knew everyone. He wanted to talk, but he couldn't. But so I walked into the room and I said, Dad, I came all the way from California to bring you something. I said, I brought you a tomato. And I told him I grew the tomato, but although God's hand was in that. So I gave him the tomato, and we all watched in amazement as my dad just held this tomato, and he was so happy. Like, he just kept feeling the tomato. It was just the most magical experience. Mind you, my father was in a coma the day before. So, we were all elated. And then he put the tomato in his other hand, and like, we practically cheered. Like, there was so much joy in that room. And I know if any of my siblings are watching, like, they absolutely know what I'm talking about. So I gave my father the tomato. We had this incredible experience with him. We all left the hospital that night thinking, it was a miracle. Like, oh my God, we were thinking he was, going to survive this. So we all leave the hospital. We come back the next day, which was a Thursday, and my father had slipped back into the coma. And the doctors told us that there was bleeding on his brain, and that, it was just a matter of time. So we talked as a family, and we decided that we were going to, since there were so many of us, we were going to take turns having like one-on-one time with our father. So my sister and I decided we would take the first night, and she gave me some time with him. And then, she said when I was done, she would come in. So before I share this with you guys, I want you to please, please take to heart what I'm sharing with you. I had an opportunity, knowing in essence that my father was on his deathbed. I took the opportunity to say everything to him I ever wanted to say. And if you have that opportunity when you are losing your loved one, it is said that when we, when we clear our heart, to speak what is on your heart, that is so powerful. And I want you to know that is absolutely true. It was very hard, but I did it because I knew if I were ever going to say the things I needed to say, that was the time. And also, if you have ever lost a loved one, and surely, the majority of us have, if you've ever lost a loved one and you didn't have that opportunity to speak your piece, please know that you can still do that. I would suggest that you maybe go out in nature, like go somewhere and sit under a tree and call your loved one's name and say to them everything you ever wanted to say. And I promise you, it will heal your heart. That there's a saying that hearts are often broken with words left unspoken. It is so true. You have to speak your piece. So, you can still do that. As I said, our spirit, our soul is eternal. Your loved one truly is with you. And I'm going to move on with the story so you will see that very clearly. So I said everything that I wanted to say to my father. Of course, there were lots of tears. I thanked him. I thanked him for everything that he had ever done for us. I told him that I didn't always understand him. I said, Dad, there were times when I didn't even think you truly loved me. Like, just everything I wanted to say to him. I was very open and honest with him. And I said, but I thank you because now I understand it all. I understand now that, you didn't know how to say I love you, but you showed us in so many ways. And, it was beautiful. Like I just cried. I said everything that I needed to say. And then something shifted. I don't know, there was like a lot of joy that came into my heart. And I read my poetry to him. I sang to him. I rubbed his hair. I held his hand. Like it just became so beautiful. And I told my dad, I said, Dad, I'm going to publish my poetry and I'm going to make you very proud of me. I said, I'm going to do something really amazing. So my father did. Wait, one more thing I need to share before I move on. Because again, this was God's hand in this. I truly believe this. As I said, I spoke my piece and then it became something so beautiful. When I left my father's room that night, and I don't remember the exact time, but I'm going to find out. As soon as I walked out of his room, I grabbed my cell phone to see what was the time. And I'm going to use the number 3:12 just because I don't remember, but it was somewhere around there. It was 3:12 a.m. I immediately pulled my phone out of my pocket. It was 3:12. That was my father's room number. And the moment I saw it, I said, wow, my father and I are complete. There is something called completion when your life experience with someone is complete. The saying that there's a reason, people come in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. So my experience with my father was complete. Our season was complete. There is no such thing as coincidence. So I left the hospital. Of course, my sister had her time with my dad. And then on that Saturday morning, my father made his transition. And he let go on Valentine's Day, which I knew in my heart was his way of saying, I love you, for the fact that he didn't know how to say those words. I think he started saying that with the grandkids, but he didn't say it to us, but he didn't know how. I'm sure his parents didn't say it. And it's just, it's a generational thing. But he transitioned on Valentine's Day, the day of love. So I get to remember my father every year on the day of love. And, we all grieve in our own way, and none of us, truly have control of that. But I truly believe that because my heart is open, that I actively work each day to keep my heart open, that God's hand was in that experience of my father's transition and made all of those beautiful, powerful things happen. Of course, I didn't know that my father was going to transition, but God surely knew. And, put that tomato vine in my backyard, that I was able to take that tomato and have that experience. The fact that my flight was already booked and, all of these synchronicity, the text message and the room number, all of these things say that things are in divine order. So, as I said, we all grieve in our own way. And for me, that day, I don't know why, but I had this overwhelming sense that I needed to go home. And, I'm sure on some level it was just a lot to deal with. And I can't really even explain it. I just wanted to go home. So I had a conversation with my mother and I said, Mom, I really need to go home for a couple of days. I said, but I will be back. I said, do you need anything? Do you need help with anything? Is there anything I can do? She said, no, everything was under control. So I booked a flight and I went back to LA. Um, when I made it home, I walked in the front door, I went upstairs and I just went directly into my bedroom and out on the balcony. Like I just remember I just wanted some air. I just wanted to breathe. And the most beautiful and amazing thing happened. So to show you that your loved ones are still with you, I was standing there on the balcony, just breathing, like literally, I just wanted to breathe. And a little red hummingbird showed up just a few feet away from me. And mind you, my father's favorite color is red. And this hummingbird put on a show for me. When I tell you it danced and it made flips and turns and spins, and it just danced and danced and danced. Like, honestly, it went on for minutes. Like, I couldn't believe it. I was just standing there, like, I didn't want to move because I didn't want to scare it away, but it was incredible. And it went on and on and on. And at some point, I said to myself, I said, wow, this is a visitor. This is not just a hummingbird that just happened to come by. Like, hummingbirds, that just doesn't happen. So he just went on and on and on. And finally, I said, oh my God, I think this is my father. And like, he just wouldn't, the bird would not leave, as if he were waiting for me to acknowledge him. And finally, I was like, well, I don't think he's going to leave until I say something. So I literally spoke out loud and I said, I love you, George Polar. And the moment I said my dad's name, the bird took off. Like, he literally was waiting for me to acknowledge him. And when I tell you, my father has shown up in some of the most beautiful, powerful ways. So after my father's funeral, I shared a poem. I dedicated a poem to him at his services. I came back to California ready to go to work. So I told the photographer who I had hired, because I wanted her to, take photographs to illustrate my book. I said, I want to do something really powerful for this book. I said, God put this poetry on my heart. As I shared in one of my previous segments, I never planned to write poetry or publish a book. So I know that God put these words on my heart. And I said, I want to do something really, really incredible. I want to somehow bring the whole world into this book. This is a universal message. So she came up with the idea, or we did, to take a trip around the world. And I literally did that for this book. 6 weeks after my father passed, I took off on a 40-day trip around the world. And one day I'm going to do a love segment, just sharing the experience of that journey, which was absolutely magical. A few weeks back, if you follow my Facebook page, I shared photos from all the places that I visited. But the stories and the experiences I had were absolutely magical. So most of the photographs in my book are from the trip around the world. And when it was all said and done, things did not work out between the photographer and I, but I'm not a photographer, but I had all of the photographs that I had personally taken during that journey, the trip around the world. So I used my own photographs to illustrate the book, which I think it actually worked out the way it was meant to all along. And just two more quick stories to illustrate again how my dad has been so present in my life. And your loved ones are as well. If if your heart is open to this, and if you want to develop a spiritual relationship with your loved one, talk to them. And believe me, they will show up and they will find ways to show you that they're with you. So, about a year ago, it was a lot of work to get the book completed. But about a year ago, the book was finally done, and I planned a book release event. And on the night of my book release, I had called a car to take me to the event. And I go outside to get in the car, and there was a little pile of sunflower seeds on the sidewalk right in front of my home. And when I saw that little pile of sunflower seeds, a little tear fell from my eye because I knew that was a message from my dad, that he was showing me that he was with me. Sunflowers are my father's absolute favorite flower. And, I didn't put those sunflower seeds there. I had never seen sunflower seeds there before, but there was a little angel who came along, one of God's little workers who knew that I would be coming along that path, that I would find those sunflower seeds, that I would instantly know that it was, a message, my father letting me know that he's with me. So I get into the car, I go to the event. And as I'm getting out of the car, the driver says, check the car, make sure you have everything. And I look inside and there was a penny on the seat. Well, pennies are my sign from God. I made a post about that several months ago, that, they show up at the most magical times. And, to me, that was just God saying that everything is in alignment. And then one last little show of my father's presence in my life, which, trust me, I could tell you so many. But my sister recently sent me some flower seeds from flowers that my dad had given to her years ago. And she told me that, she had all of these seeds. And by the way, thank you, Annette. I love my flowers. They're growing. So anyway, my sister sent me these flower seeds and I planted them on Prince's birthday. If you watch the Power of Love segment, I shared that I have this deep affinity for the artist Prince. And in that segment, I shared how, love made it possible for something so miraculous to happen. But anyway, I have this deep connection to Prince. And I planted those flower seeds on his birthday. My sister had just sent them to me and his birthday was coming up. I timed it so that they would be sprouted and I could plant them on his birthday. So I did, June 7th. Well, by the end of June, the flower seeds started to sprout and, I was having these little, leaves were coming up. Well, on my birthday, just a couple weeks ago, I celebrated my big 55 and a new sprout showed up on my birthday. And, again, there is no such thing as coincidence. I know that was my father's little way of saying happy birthday to me, a new little sprout coming up almost 2 months later. So, things are all in order. And your loved ones are with you and they will show you if you are open to that. So, please heal your heart from a loss. If you're still carrying that pain, know that your loved one is with you and they don't want you to suffer. They truly do not want you to suffer. They are no longer suffering. They are not having to deal with this life experience and all the things that we deal with in life. They are free and they want you to be free. So heal your heart and develop that spiritual relationship with your loved ones. And again, if you've gone through a breakup, you don't have to continue to hurt. Hold on to the love and know that it will come back to you. Love is such a beautiful thing. And don't ever deny yourself love. Allow yourself to love just because you do. And as I said, it becomes unconditional love and it will come back to you in the right way. So that is our Love Talk segment for today. As always, I welcome your questions and comments. If you missed any of the previous segments, you can find them here on my page on my YouTube channel or on my website, which is somethingaboutlove.foundation.org. So as always, I'm going to share a poem to close the segment. But before I do that, I want to share that I'm going to be starting something new each week. So if you are watching the segment, if you would please leave a question or a comment or just like the post, I'm going to hold a raffle each week, and I'll be sending an autographed copy of my book to whoever name is chosen each week. And of course, I'll be doing that randomly. So should I choose your name, I'll contact you through direct message, and then I'll be announcing the winner as well. So the poem that I'm sharing today, I'm just gonna share just a really quick story about this because it's a beautiful story. This poem is titled "The Love We Hold Between Us," and it is the most beautiful, perfect poem for this segment because, you know, I've shared so much about my father's transition and how God's hand was in it and how my father is still in my life. But this poem has like a very strong gardening element to it, you know, and as I said, my father was a gardener. But I wrote this poem because when I went on the trip around the world, I had an opportunity to meet an artist by the name of Alex Grey. I don't know if you all have ever heard of him, but you know, look up his work. Alex Grey is absolutely an incredible artist. And I had an opportunity to meet him and see his collection of artworks. And there was one particular artwork that I just fell in love with. I think actually I made a post about it when I posted a story on the, I don't remember the title of it, but anyways, there's a picture of a piece of artwork called "The Love We Hold Between Us." And I saw this piece of art and I told him, I said, oh my gosh, I absolutely love this piece of art. It reminds me of my father because it's two hands together and there's a heart in the center of the hands. And I said, you know, I told him that my father had recently transitioned. My father had recently transitioned. And that it reminded me of him and the time that I'd spent with him in the hospital holding his hand. And, you know, I kind of shared a little bit of that story with him. And he said to me, well, Ina, it's actually a drawing. He said, this drawing is from my personal collection and it's not for sale. And I said, oh, no problem. I understand that. No big deal. But then he said, you know, with what you just shared with me, you know, he was so touched by the story that I shared of my father. He said, Ina, I want you to have it. And we went back and forth because I was like, no, I can't take your art. And he's like, no, I want you to have it. But anyway, he said, I want you to have it on one condition. And he said that I had to write a poem of the same title. So the poem that I wrote today is based on that piece of artwork titled "The Love We Hold Between Us." So, and again, I don't know this poem by heart, so forgive me for reading it, but anyway. We are gardeners of love. We're here to cultivate and grow the seeds of our earth existence. What we plant, we're sure to sow. In the palm of every being, there's a life-sustaining seed. Plant your seed with love, it will fulfill your every need. Search your sacred garden, a part of you, never apart. Nourish your soul and you will see love in every heart. Search each other's gardens, some in need of help or tending. The gardeners of love assist the souls in need of mending. Our gardens grow to heal the soul. Our seeds renew the motherland. See that love is sacred, the love you hold within your hands. Soon we set the banquet table, all the worlds together eat. When we unite as one together, on love's plenitude we feast. May our harvest be abundant. May we share our precious crops. May each day renew our faith. May our gardening never stop. Love is our most precious resource. It grows like raindrops from above. It flows like raindrops from above. Grow in peace. Be ever generous with the bounty of your love. So, thank you all so much, as always, for joining me for this segment of Love Talks. I really appreciate your time, as I always say. And next week, we will start a new series. This sort of wraps up our series on healing the heart. And I truly hope that something that I have shared with you has been inspirational, heart opening, or healing. Truly put these things to practice and just work on keeping your heart open each and every day. And as I always say, when the heart is open, we are open and available to receive the blessings that God has for us. So until next week, I wish you all a safe and healthy, happy week filled with love and happiness. And I will see you all next week when we start the series on love in relationships. And we're going to start with love of self. So again, I thank you all for joining me, and I hope you'll join me again next week. Blessings.